a property bubble, and it's only a matter of time until the property bubble bursts. The Australian property market just can't keep going up. So I'm super, super hesitant to buy property because we're literally on the road to a recession. The thing's going to blow up. Property can't keep going up. I've heard it all the time. Try and convince me that is not the case.
Well, property, we look at
you're an idiot.
There's a property clock and everyone's going off this 18.6 cycle property clock. The funny thing is these property clocks don't work because every market's very different.
Okay.
And they work in different times and different cycles and different ways. I think what we can do is talk about the past, what's happened with property bubbles and what's happened with recessions, and what's happened during those times with other property markets, and talk about the property bubble. And I think it's just a buzzword that everyone likes to use because, okay, yes, Frank, you're 32 years old and you haven't been on this planet for as long as I have and other people have experienced it. Yes, but past performance doesn't equal future performance.
Okay.
And so people like to go off the past, and I'm going to go off the past and what's happened, but of course what's happened and people haven't broken down what's happened during that time, especially during like the 90s recession that we had here in Australia. We had the property market in Melbourne not do so well. So in 1990, interest rates were like 17, 18%. You might hear it from your parents. I remember my mum going, oh, my first house I bought for $100,000, but the interest rates were 17%. During that time, Melbourne's property market went backwards. In suburbs, so if you go the medium house price from Melbourne, it was like 5 to 10%. But if you go suburb level, I know my uncle and I know for other people that I've spoken to, 20 to 30%, the property market dropped in some of these areas in Melbourne. Okay. But during that time, very interesting, this started happening in 1989 to 1995. Okay. Property market in Melbourne went backwards. Gotcha. Okay. Crazy thing was, and just looking at my numbers just to show you, is during that time, Sydney grew 15%. You had Darwin grew 80%, Hobart 38%, Adelaide 23%, Brisbane 53%. And so you look at that and I go, okay, you had Melbourne 20 to 30% decrease, but you had the other parts around the country growing rapidly. And so property markets, once again, I always talk about it, is you can look at, recessions and things like that. And of course, a recession just means the economy is not growing and means it's contracting.
Multiple quarters in a row, yep.
Yeah, multiple quarters, 6 quarters in a row, 6 months in a row. Or 1 month, 1 month in a row for 6 months. And so we start to see, of course, stagnant growth. It doesn't happen all the time for every place. It's happening right now. Melbourne, Sydney, you see the property market not doing so well in a lot of areas, especially over the last 3 to 5 years. Melbourne's taken on the most debt. Okay, what's Melbourne's property market done? Nothing. What's, Townsville, Queensland, Brisbane, Perth, etc. We all know it's done 100-something%.
Yep.
So I look at that, the recessions in the 90s, okay, there's one example of, okay, there's a recession, but there's one example that other markets were doing extremely well that no one ever talks about. 82% growth in Darwin during that time.
Yep.
From 89 to 95, Sydney 15, you had Queensland 50-something%, etc. Okay?
This doesn't answer my question though.
It doesn't, but I want to talk about the history of this because we hear about bubbles all the time, and over the last 30 years, property markets haven't gone down, they've gone up, and they've kept going up, or they have gone down. They have. Just that we don't look at it that it hasn't gone to a scale of looking at, if we look at Europe or if we look at America, the GFC. The GFC, 2008, the GFC, the global financial crisis, in America, they were doing ninja loans. So what happened was there was no regulatory, compliance coming in. People getting loans, they call them ninja loans, just getting a loan with your eyes closed to anyone. Over leveraged, people couldn't afford to pay back those mortgages. Default, housing crisis in America, massive recession started, come into play there. Okay.
Yep.
Property market dropped 50-something+%, even more. Okay.
Across the entire country?
Yeah, like the whole country faced that.
Okay.
Now, during that time, different story, in Australia. Of course, we had some property markets go back? Yeah, but from 2002 to 2008, we had a nationwide boom. I've spoken this about a lot. We had, Townsville like 170%. You had Perth 150, Hobart about 150.
The entire country was on fire.
Yeah, whole country was on fire, but as well, Melbourne and Sydney wasn't really. It was around 20 to 60% for Melbourne and Sydney during that time.
Gotcha.
Okay. Then the GFC happens. Okay, and we start to see, there's whirlwind, there's pain, there's the stock market has dropped in America. It's happened a little bit here. And so that wasn't, of course, a positive thing that happened at that time.
Did the market shit itself then? The Australian property
Australian
market
during that time.
It did?
During 2008 to 2010, I'll pick the worst locations those markets that did not do well.
Okay.
You had Gold Coast, parts of Gold Coast, negative 20%, Noosa Heads, negative 17%, Mandurah, to negative 10% in WA,
Yep.
Airlies Beach, negative 10%.
Yep.
Okay, so those markets that did not do well during that GFC.
Dropped.
Okay, there's multiple more locations. I just picked a few, so these were some of the worst ones.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but during that time as well, from that time as well,
2008 to 2010?
Yep.
Yep.
You've had Carafa, 80% uplift during that time, doubled, 70% in Port Hedland. So this is when the mining boom started to happen.
Okay.
Port Hedland. You had parts of Bowen, 50 to 40%, 40 to 50%.
20% a year.
So you had places that done extremely well during that time. Okay.
Interesting.
But of course, there were parts that weren't doing so well. I know during that time, Melbourne, Sydney, and everything was a little bit stable. People were just saying what's going on. Didn't really affect the property market. We didn't have massive downward swings. Some areas, of course, I mentioned that did, but a lot of places didn't have massive decreases in the property market during the GFC.
Gotcha.
Really affected the American market, affected Europe a lot as well. And there's other reasons why I won't get onto that topic. But yeah, that's during those times, of course, we didn't have a massive recession in Australia with the housing crisis.
Cool. Do you put that down to just the tight lending that was going on or still is right now?
Sorry, what do you mean by that?
The fact that there was ninja loans in one economy in America, and Australia, it's just not that at all.
Yeah, we don't have that. So APRA does a really, really good job, and they put a buffer amount on the mortgage. So if you're getting a mortgage at 6%,
Yep.
they're going to assess you at 9%.
Yep.
And see if you can afford to hold that property. So really, really tight laws.
They just
which is
stress
great.
test it. Yep.
Yeah, really,
Okay.
really, really tight laws, and they stress test that, which is really good.
Cool. So, all right, that's fine. GFC's fine, but it's impossible that properties can continue rising in value. It's not possible.
Well,
Tell me that. Houses are
it's not
$2 million.
possible. Of course, it's not possible, but they do slow down, and sometimes they go backwards, or they stay.
No, I'm
they
saying
plateau.
property prices in Australia are too expensive. It's too unattainable for everyone. Property prices have to stop going up.
It is getting unaffordable, but there is still people buying them. So, like, as much as what people say it's unaffordable, we hear a lot of that on the news. But if you go into these middle class areas or rich areas as well, the properties are still getting sold. People are still buying them. There's people out there that can't afford them. It's just less people. Will it keep going up? It will in certain areas, and it's not always going to happen. But there's one area doing well, it's like a pendulum. There's another area that's going to do not so well.
So explain that.
Well, you look at now, let's just look over the last 5 years. We've had Melbourne go backwards in value. You've had Brisbane do like nearly 100% plus. Okay. So you got one suburb or one location in Australia is doing really, really well. At the same time, one's doing very, very bad. So you do get these ups and downs. You got Brisbane and Adelaide more expensive than Melbourne. Okay, it's not the first time that's happened, and it's happening again. And so now what's going to happen is Melbourne will start to catch back up. So it's affordable, and people come back into Melbourne. Economy will start to change, and that will change. And then what will happen is we're not going to hear nothing about Adelaide, Brisbane, and all these markets.
Go quiet again.
And we're just going to focus on Melbourne, Sydney, and these other new areas. And so this happens a lot. So the bubble word and the property market can't keep doing this. Property, and I'll touch on this in a second, it's made up of multiple things.
Yep.
Okay.
So your belief is that the market will continue to move, and I'm stirring you up saying the market can't, right? Because you look at everywhere else in the world. You look at London, you look at Singapore, you look at Dubai, you look at all these places where people want to live. Those markets will continue to go up and up and up, millions and millions and millions, and it will continue to become unattainable, but they will continue to still go up. I'm stirring you up with that. What I'm saying, markets will continue to move. You just need to pick the right market at the right time and get in right at the start of that. So your Melbourne in a couple of years, or your Melbourne today, let's say.
If there's a recession or something's happening in the economy, but in another part of Australia, there's high demand of jobs, there's great employment, there is great opportunity. You've got the GRP is growing, you've got internal migration starting to increase, you've got the output of the economy is doing extremely well, the value add to the Australian economy as well is doing a lot better than the whole other parts around the country. And you start to look at as well, tourism is ramping up in some of these areas, or even if it starts to slow down, but the diversity in that area is very strong as well. And you've got affordable housing and you've got, low supply of housing, then that market there is going to do well regardless of the recession or regardless of how good Melbourne or Sydney is doing.
Regardless of what's happening in your backyard.
Yeah.
There's always, it's almost like a different country. 2012,
we had a guy called Harry Dent, who's this guy that made it on TV in Australia. He's an American economist. I look at him as an idiot, to be honest. And he just comes on and he starts, putting fear, writing books about the Australian property market. It's in a bubble. It's going to crash. People are listening to him. I don't know how he makes it onto 60 Minutes. Really don't know. Because he's been
says more about 60 Minutes than Harry Dent.
Yeah. For the last 60 years, he's been trying to say the Australian property market's in a bubble and it needs to burst.
Okay.
There's photos, there's videos, there's everything out there. You can go search about Harry Dent. He is always wrong. And we hear the fear mongering all the time.
60 Minutes is not always wrong, though.
No, it's not always wrong. It's always correct, unfortunately, but people watch it. And so with that, GFC didn't go in that downward cycle. Let's go to COVID. Okay, we have COVID that comes into play. Massive disruptor. You could say, we were probably in a depression or a recession, deep recession at that point in time.
Yep.
And there was a lot of things going on. We had banks all saying that there was going to be 20, 30, 40% drops in the property market. Mm-hmm. Banks, big corporations, on TV, fear-mongering. How come these people are saying these things when they're so, you could say, smart, intelligent, rich, wealthy, got a lot of money backed by them? How come they're saying that and they're getting it wrong? Sometimes I ask that.
Okay.
What's your take when you start you're hearing banks talking about
the economists
and all these guys that work for the bank saying there's going to be a recession in the property market, but during COVID, 96% of regions, double-digit growth, so more than 10% growth annually during that 2-year period.
Well, I think it's black swan event, right? So I think it's difficult for anyone to come out, Harry Dent, the RBA, I think it's hard for people to come out and say, well, the market's going to implode or the market's going to go up, because we've never seen something like that. I mean, we have, but many, many, many years ago. I think it's hard for anyone really to predict what is actually going to happen when that event happens. Now, market could have shut itself. The entire Australian market could have shut itself. I guess why didn't it shit itself? I'll throw the question back on you. Why didn't the entire Australian property market shit itself during COVID?
So during that first lockdown, we had people scarce, pulling the properties off the market, all that sort of jazz. Majority of Australians have their properties, not majority, I should say. We have a fair bit of Australians with low amount of debt on their family homes in Australia.
Yep. What is the debt? We've ran these before.
I think it's around 30% or more of houses are paid off in Australia.
Gotcha.
30% of Australians as well are renting. So the majority of people own their homes, of course.
Yep.
And during that time, of course, a lot of Australians were saving. Okay. So during COVID, savings went up like 40%, some ridiculous amount. So
it's dropped down to 2% now.
Yeah.
So they ran those numbers, 2% savings rate at the moment.
So you look at that, people saving so much money. A lot of people working. Financially, they're in the right position. Saving out of lockdowns. Okay, housing shortage. Housing shortage is probably one of the biggest factors that can make a market go into like a massive ramp. Not just that, interest rates went down from 3.8% during that time, went down to 1.9%.
Yeah.
You're giving out loans. They want to get the economy turning.
Yep.
Okay? This is how smart, I look at these politicians and people in power. Oh, let's just keep everyone in lockdown. Give them, you can't do X, Y, and Z. Social distancing. You can't do this and that. But we're going to give you money, pretty much free money, you could say. But you can go to a house auction. You can buy a house, but you can't go more than 5K radius or a couple K radius. So people going out buying houses, prices are going up. Okay, what happens? We start to see interest rates go up pretty quick. after around that 2022 May, property markets started to slow down. Not everywhere, but the ones that kept going and kept, were on fire were the ones that were supposed to keep rallying and keep going and growing in value because of fundamentals.
Not because of interest rates, not because of
interest rates.
Yeah. So you're saying, because I know what you are talking about, you're talking about the Melbournes, you're talking about the Sydneys almost. Those are the markets that have already had...
Even Hobart. Even Hobart was in that category.
Yeah, but 7 to 8 years already of double-digit growth from 2012 to 2019-20.
Yep.
Then they had a couple of extra years just because of the whole stimulation that was going on.
Yeah.
Those are the markets where people were buying into thinking this is going to keep going, not actually understanding, well, hang on, the fundamentals are saying otherwise. It was mass exoduses from those cities. Cool.
Correct.
Gotcha.
And so you look at that, bad locations. Melbourne, negative 10 to 20% after COVID.
Yep.
Sydney, 10 to 15.
Yep.
Okay, Ballarat, negative 9%.
Yep.
Bendigo, negative 10. Bass Coast, which is in Victoria, negative 14. Byron, negative 22%. Okay, Byron Bay. Geelong, negative 10%. Peninsula, negative 13%. Port Phillip in Melbourne, negative 16%. Northern Beaches, negative 13%.
So it's really Vic and New South Wales, yeah.
Even Hobart, negative 10%. There's parts of Hobart as well dropping. So, and parts of, Tassie. So this is what I look at. COVID, let's say COVID didn't happen. Mm-hmm. Melbourne, Sydney, and probably New South Wales, Victoria, and even Tassie's in that category as well. They weren't supposed to be having growth.
The 2019 cutoff.
And when I say that, I'm generalising, but of course they're not supposed to have any of that growth during COVID. Mm-hmm. Okay, those markets were supposed to slow down because they already had a lot of markets in those states as well just come off their high. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then you had that slowing down in 2019, 2020. COVID happens, they take off, slow back down right away. From that, we had after COVID, you had places that was doing quite well, like you had Townsville 80%, Bundaberg 107, Ipswich, Logan, Armidale, WA. I can keep going off. Geraldton, Morford Vale in South Australia.
Your WA, your Queenslands, and your Adelaide, South Australia.
All these places had anywhere from 80 to 150% growth.
Awesome.
After COVID.
Awesome.
They were meant to because of fundamentals.
Gotcha.
Okay, and so this isn't a bubble. It's not a bubble. What happened? Okay, people think it's a bubble. They use this buzzword. It's not a bubble. It's fundamentals. The economy, GRP was on fire. Jobs were on fire. Internal migration. We looked at Victoria, lost a lot of people, went to Queensland. Mm-hmm. That's not just one reason why the property market grew in value, because of jobs, because of opportunity, because of the undersupply of housing as well. And the economy changes. It's happened for many, many years. The cycle changes and turns. It does the same thing.
Gotcha. So that's fine, and I understand that, but then there's also naysayers, and I genuinely hear it all the time. I had it this week. Someone asked me, what do you think about the property market? Like, is it going to continue to go? What do I have to respond to with that? What can you respond to the camera? Like, after this COVID bubble, whatever it is, can the property market continue to rise?
Well, let's be honest. If there was a massive depression, a depression goes for many years, like after the war, the Great Depression, they call it. That's when it's a recession, but a massive recession. And in that depression, there can be, hyperinflation, which means that your money loses value and cost of goods are very, very expensive. So it goes into a hyper inflation. So imagine like double the inflation after COVID.
Yep.
And then the dollar's got no value, and that can happen. Also, there's many things that can happen. Can that happen more frequently these days? Probably not. Depressions and things like that and hyperinflations, because we've got the money system, the mandatory money policy in Australia, and the country in the world, is very different to back, when the depression happened. And we've got, corporations, technology, the governments can kind of stay on top of things. They can read, what's going on with the financials in the economy, where during those times of the 50s and the 40s and prior, they didn't have that technology. So it was very hard to track a country. Now it's a little bit easier and they can track things. And do I think we would go into a massive bubble where it'll blow up and the housing will be a housing crisis and it'll blow up here? No, because there'll be markets that won't be doing so well in parts of the economy, in certain parts of Australia that won't, and there'll be other parts. So it's, like I said, it's going to change. The waves change. The tide changes.
Gotcha. So you think the only way that there could potentially be, if Australia goes through a massive depression where the value of money is lost. However, in saying that, the value of money is lost or lowers, then that means that your debt lowers essentially because you need like your debt's reducing essentially, but the value of you need more money to be able to buy that same asset, right? So does that not mean that the value of houses will continue to rise?
It can if the interest rates start to reduce and builds a bit more pressure, because during recessions and during hard times they lower interest rates to get money back into the system, and they do that, and then that can create sometimes a bit of a bubble, or I don't want to use the word bubble, but a bit of a inflation boom. And if things start to inflate, like goods and services and property, so it comes into that category, and that's what happened during COVID. So they gave easy access to money, and that was probably poor decision making of what happened. But there was a bit of, that growth that
inflation
happened. growth that happened.
Which is the exact same thing, right?
Yes, it is. And I think when I look at this bubble, we have a bit of an issue at the moment. The solution to try and fix this is if you had an oversupply of property in the country, and let's say moderate migration, we probably wouldn't have massive spikes of growth in the country. Because if there's an oversupply of property, then the property market won't, grow that rapidly, because like anything, supply versus demand. That's investing 101. Supply versus demand. If there's too much supply, there's no demand, prices start to reduce. Okay. At the moment, we don't have that. Okay. There's a lack. And just to talk about the solution here, they need 1.2 million new dwellings coming into the country of Australia by 2029. Okay.
We're well behind.
To keep up with the migration patterns and the plan that they have. Okay. We're already behind. So just to give you some numbers, 2023, 2024, 176,000 dwellings. We needed to build 240 dwellings that year. So there's a shortage. 2024, 2025, 150,000 dwellings. Okay. We're supposed to build, once again, 240. There's a decrease. So there's a total of, 326 dwellings they've built. Okay. They need to build 500,000. So 174,000 dwelling shortage. Okay. So that means that leaves us for the next 4 years to build about 870,000 dwellings by the end of 2029. And that's not happening at the moment. Okay. So is there a housing bubble? No, it's not a bubble. It's something happening because there's not enough properties getting built. And there's just not enough supply. Now it's hard because you see certain areas like in a regional town do quite well. And there's a housing shortage, and you can't just go out there and build more properties in some of these regional towns because there's a lack of builders as well, and that has a massive effect on that.
But even just not even regionals, just capitals. You can't build properties on top of properties. I mean, you can build apartment blocks, but we're a bit different to, I guess, Europe, right? We don't necessarily love living in big apartment blocks, so you can't Melbourne CBD is Melbourne CBD. You can't build any more assets there. So
it is changing, but the way of living is, because it used to be, around that 3 people per dwelling, even a little bit more during the, in the 90s. So it was more than 3 people per dwelling. I think it was around 3.5. Today it's around that 2.5, 2.6. So people are having less and less children.
Well, that's exactly where it's going to go to.
And now, apartment living is starting to be very attractive and affordable.
Yep, a little bit more desirable.
Yeah, it's starting to be a bit like Europe.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And we'll see that change over the next 20, 30 years. But until then, you just can't be it's very simple. I think if you actually do break it down, it is quite simple. It's what you just said right then, the supply versus the demand. There's not enough properties and they're not catching up.
No, and the
demand's still there. People are still moving to Australia.
Demand is still there. And I think the crazy thing is, if we just look at the construction industry, over the 2022 to 2025 financial year, okay?
2022 to 2025 financial, over that 3-year period.
Over that 3-year period. 7,500, just over 7,500, builders have gone bust.
Yeah.
Okay. That is a huge number of builders across the country. So we have a solution. We got to build 1.2 million. The crazy thing is, the government, they're building 1% of those 1.2 million homes. Majority of private sector.
Yep. And they're going bust.
They're the ones going bust, not the government. And we have a solution, but the solution is that it's relying on us, but they want to make it harder to build. They want to make it harder for taxes.
Which we've touched on that. We can't go into that again. We'll go to jail.
Do we have a real bubble here, or are we in a bubble? No, it's not a bubble. It's meant to happen.
Gotcha.
It's not inflation that's gone into hyperinflation and goods and services just gone up because of too much money printing and because of bad government policies. It's because interest rates have gone up, okay? But there is an undersupply of property in these certain areas and there's the high demand, okay?
Yep.
And the economy is doing well. Migration's on fire. If you have a look at migration.
And not slowing down.
It's not slowing down. 2022, 2023, we had a record migration pattern, over nearly 550,000 people coming to Australia. The following year, 2023, 2024, 440,000 people roughly coming to Australia. Okay, new Australian people from overseas. Okay, the trend for this financial year is supposed to be around 380,000 people. Okay, then next year 260. The years after that, they're predicting 225,000 people year on year, so all the way up to 2029. Okay, if they have blowout years where they're bringing in more people, is that going to fix the problem? No. Because we've already got a housing shortage.
Yep.
And there's going to be more and more people that need a place to live. Now, the crazy thing is 70% of these people can't afford to buy a home. They come into Australia.
Affect the rentals.
So it's going to affect the rentals.
Yep.
We already had rental prices go up, 20, 30, 40%, 50% in the space of 5 years, which is huge. Normally your rent goes up around 3%.
Per annum, yeah. Yep.
So now can you see I'm trying to put all the pieces here. What I'm trying to do is give people an understanding of what's going on. Shortage of housing. Builders gone bust. Migration is is growing and it's on track. They're growing probably a little bit too fast as well.
Yep.
Okay.
And Australia is still a very, very, very desirable country.
Yes.
And the more that we go through the turbulence through the world and people are fighting and Europe's, we don't have to get into that, but the more Australia becomes desirable. We're our own place. We're separated from everyone. It's a very, very safe economy. It's awesome for jobs. Australia is definitely a very desirable place to live. So I don't see it as a bubble, but yeah, you're going to show me a graph here. Tell me.
30% of Australians rent. Okay. And that's kind of increasing a little bit now as well. Like there's a bit more Australians now starting to rent. So that number's actually going up.
The rentfesters, good.
Yes. So crazy thing was prior to COVID, we had over 108,000 dwellings on the market for rent. Today it's under 60,000 dwellings. Okay. Back then in 2020, just to put this in context, around 2.5 to 3% was a vacancy rate. Nationwide terms, that's quite healthy. You want it to be around there. Why? Because then you don't have this massive rental shortage, and not that you don't have rentals going up dramatically with prices.
50, 60.
So for the people that complain, rent's unaffordable, okay, the reason why is now vacancy rate's gone to 1 to 1.2% nationwide.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's a massive shortage. That's why rents have gone up like 50% nearly in the space of 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay, if we're not building enough properties, those properties there, 1/3 of those properties that get built are going to investors. If there's not enough properties getting built, and then the rental market's going to be affected here too. So this affects, for the people out there that are not favouring the investors, that hate people building wealth, this affects you.
Of course it does.
So you got these people that are trying to make it harder for investors because they think investors affect the market the most. It's not. It's everyday Australians that buy property.
70%, the vast majority.
But if you keep making it hard, it's going to be harder for yourself as well.
Yep.
So it's a double sword.
Okay, but it does affect both. So these building approvals, bust and everything that we've spoken about affects both rental and the actual value of ours.
Yep.
Cool. Interesting.
And so where it leads me to is I think we look at now the data. There's a massive housing shortage. Are we in a bubble? No, I don't think we are. We have great lending policies where they put buffers of an extra 3% on top of the lending criteria for the individual. So to see if you can afford that property. So it doesn't, you don't go into, liquidation and you can't, pay for your home and you have to, default on that mortgage.
Yep.
That doesn't happen. But we've got a massive housing shortage. We've got, of course, building shortage, construction going out of work. We've got as well the rental shortage as well. So this is affecting all sides of the coin, where markets are not going to do well over the next 5 years, but there are markets that are going to do well. So this bubble, it's just a buzzword that gets thrown around. Markets are going to go up, and there's markets that are going down. So I don't think we're in a bubble.
Cool. And there's still going to be markets here. I think the last piece that you just said, there's still going to be markets that are still going to do your 100%, your 150% over the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years. I think it's super important. I think if I could ask a question of what would it actually look like for Australia to be in a bubble? So how you mentioned those fundamentals. What would need to happen with migration patterns? What would need to happen with supply with housing? What would need to act? What would the landscape need to look like in order for Australia to be like, fuck, I reckon we're actually in a bit of a bubble. I think this thing's going to burst. I know it's a very out there question, but
it's hard because you look at, say, Japan at the moment. Japan's housing is on fire at the moment. They've got very low interest rates, like 1% to 2% or something.
0%.
Something crazy. So they're giving out money. So when you have that's creating a bubble because there's no fundamentals there of making a property market grow naturally. It's growing because of artificial money being put into the system and people using it and just being reckless and buying property. Or it's not being reckless, but they're buying property and doing things
just because they can, because they've got free loans.
And if there is a low supply, the demand pimps up. But when you've got a place like Townsville or these other places I've always mentioned that we talk about, Ipswich and Bundaberg and all these places, the property market's doing well, not because of interest rates or that, it's because of the economy in the area and desirability, migration and a whole bunch of things. So for Australia to go into that bubble term, I believe we've got to go into a massive recession, interest rates drop again, and then this inflation kicks off. And it can go into hyperinflation or, a bit more, inflation, whatever term you want to be using these days, that then creates this bubble because it's like, it's not being created the right way. It's being created artificially.
Yep.
So are we in that right now? No.
Absolutely not.
We're not. And so I think these people and these economists just use it for clickbait. And I think the future looks great for Australia. And I think people should really, really look at things and understand these things that we're speaking about because it's actually going to make you or break you. A lot of people can listen to the Harry Dent and all these economists out there and take their advice, Steve Keen and all these other guys, but not do anything and be scared.
Yeah.
But for the ones that actually understand this, learn it, listen what I'm saying here, go out there, research it, do it yourself. Don't listen just to me. Listen to other people, but as well do your own research. And you'll see that things are happening for a reason. And it's not because it's the wrong reasons for the right reason.
And I actually said this, I had a chat with Austin this morning about a client that he's been presented a property, and I'll finish on this note, right? And he's come up with all these reasons as to why this property is not the right one. And I said to us, and we're doing training on this week, I thought it might be good to finish on. There is always 100 reasons of why you should not invest. There's the risk, and then there's this, and then I can't see the property, and the blah, 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 and I don't know, this property went backwards, 15 years ago. There's thousands of reasons always. There's one reason why you should, to get you to where you want to go. That's it. That's it. So exactly what you've said right then. Yes, there might be thousands of reasons why Harry Dent is correct, but there's also a lot of fucking reasons why you should be buying a property today. Because in 5 years' time, the likelihood, if you buy correctly, it'll be worth double. I think it's very important. But cool. I love it. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I do. I want to leave it on this. There's booms and busts that come and go, but during those times, the most successful investors build wealth during those times, regardless. So don't go out there and think that, oh, shit, it's a bubble. I'm buying at the top. There's other markets at the same time. You look at GFC, Netflix, Facebook, all these great companies. Uber was created during those times. The 90s, you had Microsoft and Apple and all these companies were created during those times, during the tech.com bubble. And there was recessions then. America's property market wasn't doing well, but guess what? There was investors that were doing well if it was in the stock market or investing in companies or investing in properties as well. So in every bad time, there is also an opportunity. In every good time, there's always an opportunity. It's just invest when you can, invest the right way, make sure you look at fundamentals and understand how things work before getting involved.
I love it. Thank you again. Next time I'll see you, we'll be in Europe, my friend. Looking forward to it.
Likewise. We'll see. So this podcast, we might have a break for one week.
We'll have a break for 1 week. I don't even think, or we will. We are having a break.
We are going to have one break. So one episode is going to be missed for consistent weeks, but when we get back, we'll be ready to rock.
Providing as much value as we can. Thank you, guys.